Okay, what is this silly thing? Kind of a little silvery looking thing strapped to the bottom portion of a compressor. That is a crankcase heater. It's one of the common ways crankcase heaters are made. There's a number of different styles. Some of them actually have a weld that they fit into on the side of the compressor. That one, of course, is an external strap. However, simply enough, these things are there to keep the compressor warm. So why do we need to keep the compressor warm? Now here's a look at one of these things off the compressor. Now, two wires coming to it. These are usually 240 volt. They can be 110, but it's uncommon because there's 240 volt at the air conditioner or heat pump. All right, why do we need to keep the compressor warm? Well, it's not so much the compressor we need to keep warm as the oil inside the compressor. Refrigerant and oil have an affinity for each other. If there's refrigerant in one part of an air conditioning system and there's oil in another part of a refrigerating system, the refrigerant will tend to go to the oil. And if the oil is cold, it goes much more rapidly. In fact, warm oil will oftentimes reject refrigerant and it won't go into it. Now understand, refrigerants, virtually all the refrigerants anymore are miscible or mixable with oil. They mix with oil kind of like solvent mixes with motor oil, or gasoline mixes with motor oil. It's very, very similar. So if, let's say the compressor is cold, and the heat pumps, this is the most common to use these things. If the compressor is very cold, inside the structure is warm, so the refrigerant is going to go outside into the compressor where this heater is, and it's going to mix with the oil. What does that do? Well, if you mix a solvent with oil, you dilute the oil and it loses its lubricating qualities. Plus, you're filling that compressor can full of oil. Okay, if you do that, then when the compressor starts, the refrigerant is going to boil out of the oil. When the refrigerant boils out of the oil, you get a foaming action, somewhat like boiling a mixture of water and dishwashing liquid. It'll kind of foam up like that, except it's much more. Okay, what is that going to do? That foam is going to get into the ports of the compressor, could slug the compressor on a piston type compressor. Any liquid that gets into the cylinder of a piston type compressor is liable to damage the compressor. You take the two things it does, possible damage to the compressor by slugging, and the fact that the oil is not a good lubricant with refrigerant in it, this is bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a heater out there. That heater is going to warm up that compressor, and you notice that strap was on the very bottom part of the compressor where the oil is. That's going to drive any refrigerant out of the system. When it drives that refrigerant out of the system, then when it starts up, there's no oil foaming, there's no slugging, the oil is not diluted. Okay, a little bit about how these things are connected up. These things can be just connected. The two wires could be connected to the incoming wire and you're on all the time. That's not the best way. The best way is to shut it off after the compressor starts. And this may be how they're set up. I'll do another video showing different ways you can set these crankcase heaters up to get shut off. But for this one, we will usually try to shut this crankcase heater off if the compressor is running. But that's what it's about. Now, on newer compressors, such as the scroll type compressors, we don't see crankcase heaters anywhere near as much as we used to. They're not unknown, but we don't use them as much because the scrolls really can't slug. I kind of think they're a good idea on heat pump applications, but they still, some of these scrolls don't use them. Air conditioners, should they have a crankcase heater? Well, some of them come up with crankcase heaters. Some of them come out with them. Some of them have them, some of them don't. It's not near as important because usually if you're air conditioning, it's warm outside. That doesn't mean that's always true. Air conditioning in commercial applications oftentimes will cool down to around 40 degrees. So they may be used on an air conditioner too. Anyway, that's what the crankcase heater is.